The knock came soft, 3 taps that didn't belong in a night like this. It was too calm, too rehearsed, like someone trying to hide a monster behind manners. I was still in my office, papers scattered across the desk, when my wife's scream tore through the phone line. "She's not breathing. Oh God, she's not breathing." The world tilted. My badge fell from my hand, clattering against the hardwood. I remember sprinting through red lights, the city flashing past like a heartbeat gone wild. When I turned onto our street, I saw the strobes before the house, their blue and red reflection bleeding across our white fence, the same one I built after Lily's accident. My car door barely shut before I ran. The night smelled of smoke and gunpowder. Neighbors stood frozen on porches, their faces washed pale in flashing light. And then I saw her, my daughter, sprawled beside her wheelchair, blood seeping through the thin fabric of her sweatshirt, her earbuds still glowing faintly from her phone. My knees hit the concrete so hard I didn't feel the pain. I heard the paramedics shouting numbers, calling for units, one of them pressing his hand against her chest. "We got a pulse," someone yelled, but it sounded far away, like underwater. Then came the voice that snapped everything back into focus, Karen's. "It was an accident," she cried, trembling, her red manicure streaked with tears. She came at me, I was scared. Her hand still shook, gripping the small silver pistol like it was her HOA membership card. The officers stepped between us as I lunged forward, but I could already taste the metal of my rage. The same woman who fined us for leaving Lily's ramp unpainted had just fired a bullet into my child. "You shot my little girl," I said, my voice flat, empty, colder than I'd ever heard it. She stumbled back, whispering something about rules and noise complaints. The words didn't register. All I saw was the muzzle flash that had ripped my world open. I wanted to grab her, to make her understand what she'd taken, but the sight of Lily's limp hand stopped me. The paramedics lifted her, blood trailing down the stretcher like a ribbon of everything I loved. Someone tried to pull me back, saying I needed to stay clear, but my mind had already crossed a line that night. I was no longer the Attorney General. I was a father watching justice bleed out on his driveway. Before that night, our street looked like the kind of place realtors used to sell dreams. Maple Drive was quiet, almost rehearsed, white fences trimmed straight as ruler lines, kids' bikes leaning against mailboxes, flags swaying in front yards like a promise that nothing bad could happen here. Our house sat near the cul-de-sac, a pale blue 2-story with a ramp that glowed under the porch light, built after the accident that took Lily's legs. I remember the day we moved in, she called it our restart. We'd been through enough pain for a lifetime, her spinal injury, my endless work hours, the drunk driver who walked away with a suspended sentence. The move was supposed to be healing, a chance to give Lily the kind of peace she deserved. She was 15, but in some ways older than me, sharp, unshakable, the kind of kid who smiled even when her hands trembled trying to maneuver her wheelchair. Music was her therapy. Every evening, she'd sit on the porch, earbuds dangling, humming along to the same song she played after every surgery, Brave, by Sarah Bareilles. It became the soundtrack of our new beginning. The neighbors seemed kind enough at first. The Millers across the street brought pie. The Parkers waved every morning when I left for the office. And then there was Karen, president of the HOA, a woman who treated the neighborhood like her kingdom and the bylaws like her holy book. She was the type who'd smile with her teeth but not her eyes, her tone dipped in honey and judgment at the same time. She'd been there since the community was built, always the first to welcome newcomers with a list of violations printed in bold. Our first interaction came the week after we settled in. Lily had been out on the porch, listening to music, a soft playlist of piano covers. Karen walked up the driveway in her red blazer, clipboard in hand, and said, "We try to keep noise levels low here after 8 p.m., I'm sure you understand." I remember laughing it off, thinking it was a misunderstanding. Lily turned down the volume immediately, polite as ever. But that was the first warning shot, not from a gun, but from a woman who couldn't stand anything she didn't control. Over time, her visits grew frequent. A note taped to the mailbox for unapproved ramp color. Another complaint about wheelchair skid marks on the sidewalk after rain. She called them community standards. I called them harassment. Still, I bit my tongue. As Attorney General, I'd built my career on restraint, on believing rules meant safety, not oppression. But each of Karen's smiles chipped away at that belief. She had the kind of authority no one questioned, not because she earned it, but because people were too comfortable to fight back. I'd see her at HOA meetings, sitting at the head of the table with that same fake concern in her eyes, preaching about peace and order, while her words drew invisible borders around who belonged and who didn't. I should have seen it then, the way she looked at Lily, not with pity, but irritation. Like my daughter's presence ruined the picture-perfect suburb she wanted to control. That ramp wasn't just a piece of metal to her, it was defiance, a reminder that life could be messy and human, and she hated that. Looking back, the signs were all there, the clipped smiles, the passive-aggressive emails, the way neighbors avoided taking sides. But I ignored them, convincing myself that civility could keep the peace. I told myself Karen was just difficult, not dangerous. I told myself we were safe here. I was wrong. Karen's resentment didn't explode all at once, it built, slow and poisonous, the way mold creeps beneath paint. At first, it was petty things. An HOA notice tucked into our mailbox: please limit outdoor activity volume after 8 p.m. as per Section 3B of Community Code. Lily's music was soft enough to be drowned out by crickets, but that didn't matter. A week later came another notice: your ramp's silver rails do not match neighborhood color standards. Please repaint to beige within 10 days. I remember standing there with the letter in my hand, staring at the bold signature, Karen L. Whitmore, HOA President. My wife tried to brush it off, said maybe she was just trying to enforce rules evenly. But I knew better. It wasn't about rules, it was about control. Karen's power wasn't official, it was psychological. She fed off compliance, off watching people bend to her. And when we didn't, when Lily smiled through it instead of apologizing, something in Karen shifted. Her glances lingered longer. Her greetings grew shorter. She started walking her dog past our porch just to mutter comments under her breath. Some people think rules don't apply when they play the victim, I overheard one evening. I wanted to confront her, but Lily always stopped me with that same steady voice: Dad, please, she's not worth it. And she was right, until she wasn't. Then came the HOA meeting. Karen stood at the front like a judge, clipboard in one hand, fake compassion dripping from her tone. We've received multiple complaints regarding noise disturbances from the Reynolds residents, she announced, eyes sliding toward us. I raised my brow. Multiple complaints? I asked. You mean you? The room fell silent. Neighbors shifted in their seats, pretending to check their phones. Karen smiled, the kind of smile people wear before swinging a knife. Rules are rules, Mr. Reynolds. We all have to follow them. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. My daughter plays music on a porch, music that helps her cope with pain. You're telling me that's a violation? She didn't blink. I'm telling you, she said sweetly, we expect the same discipline from everyone. That word, discipline, hit me like ice water. It wasn't about sound anymore, it was about dignity. She wanted to shrink Lily until she disappeared behind her perfect beige fence lines. After that night, Karen made it personal. She parked her SUV halfway across our driveway once, claiming there wasn't enough space. She sent a photo of our garbage cans placed 2 inches beyond curb regulation. She fined us $50 for having unapproved solar lights on the ramp, lights Lily had picked out herself because she liked how they sparkled at night. Each complaint came with the same sanctimonious closing: please be a good neighbor. The hypocrisy burned, but what cut deeper was the silence of everyone else. The same neighbors who smiled at Lily during morning walks now avoided eye contact. They'd seen Karen tear others apart before, one family for painting their door blue instead of tan, another for installing a basketball hoop, and they knew better than to interfere. It wasn't a community anymore. It was her kingdom, and fear was her law. I tried to reason with her once more, face to face. I knocked on her door, documents in hand, showing our compliance with every rule. She opened it halfway, smirked, and said, "I know who you are, Mr. Attorney General. But here, your title means nothing." Then she closed it in my face. That's when I realized, this wasn't a woman policing rules. This was someone policing power, and my daughter's strength, her joy, her refusal to be small, was the one thing Karen couldn't tolerate. The resentment wasn't simmering anymore. It was boiling, and I could feel it, something dark and reckless building behind that perfect smile, waiting for a night when no one would stop her. The night of the incident still replays in my mind like a film I can't stop watching, every frame burned into memory, every sound sharp as glass. It began like any other evening on Maple Drive, the sun dipping behind the oaks, the air heavy with the scent of freshly cut grass and barbecue smoke. Inside, my wife was loading the dishwasher while Lily sat on the porch, her wheelchair angled toward the garden lights. She always liked the view at dusk, the way the shadows stretched long across the lawn, softening everything. Her favorite song drifted faintly through her earbuds, barely audible, more a heartbeat than a tune. I was downtown at the courthouse, wrapping up paperwork for a civil appeal, when her laughter filled the background of our last phone call. "I'm fine, Dad," she'd said when I told her I'd be late. "You worry too much." Those were the last words she spoke to me before the gunfire. According to the reports, Karen appeared at 8:42 p.m. sharp. Her SUV screeched to a stop in front of our driveway, headlights slicing through the twilight. Neighbors would later say she'd been drinking, the half-empty glass of white wine still in her cup holder confirmed it. She stormed up our path, clipboard under one arm, flashlight in the other, shouting before she even reached the porch. "You think you're special? You think rules don't apply to you?" Lily looked up, startled, fumbling to pause her music. I'm sorry if it's too loud," she said softly. "I didn't mean, don't lie to me." Karen snapped, her face red, her words slurred around fury. "Every damn night, this noise. Every night, your pity parade." My wife came running from the kitchen, the screen door creaking as it swung open. "Karen, calm down. She's just a child." But calm wasn't in her anymore. The flashlight dropped from her hand, clattering against the porch steps, and in one smooth, horrifying motion, she reached into her purse and pulled out the pistol. I said, "Turn it off." The shot split the night in half. One crack, loud, final, echoing down the street like thunder tearing the sky apart. Lily jerked backward, a crimson bloom spreading fast across her chest. My wife screamed her name, lunging forward as Karen froze, the gun trembling in her grip. The neighbors' porch lights flicked on one by one, faces peering through curtains. For a second, no one moved. Then chaos erupted, screams, running footsteps, the metallic smell of blood filling the air. My wife pressed both hands against the wound, shouting for help, her fingers slick with red. Karen staggered back, shaking her head, mumbling, "It just went off. I didn't mean to. She scared me." Her voice cracked, small and pathetic now, but I know she meant every word before she pulled that trigger. I was still on the road when my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Officer Henson, his voice tight, urgent. "Sir, there's been an incident at your residence. Your daughter's been transported to Memorial General." My heart stopped. I don't remember driving the next 6 miles, only the sound of tires screaming and the blur of sirens. When I reached our house, paramedics were loading Lily into the ambulance, oxygen mask over her face, chest barely rising. My wife was sobbing uncontrollably, her clothes soaked in blood. Karen stood on the curb, handcuffed now, mascara streaking down her cheeks as she muttered, "I was just defending myself." The words barely registered. All I could see was the blood trail leading from our porch to the driveway, glistening in the blue and red lights. I followed the ambulance to the hospital, every second stretching like a lifetime. The monitors, the doctors, the metallic taste of panic, it all blurred together. But one moment stayed crystal clear, the image of that pistol in Karen's hand, the same one she'd waved in HOA meetings to brag about her right to protect her property. That night, she wasn't protecting anything. She was punishing. And as I stood under the sterile glow of the ER lights, watching my daughter fight for breath, something inside me hardened. The law had always been my weapon of choice. But that night, for the first time in my life, I swore to use it like a blade. The hospital smelled like bleach and panic, that sterile, artificial scent that tries and fails to hide the truth underneath. The truth was blood. My daughter's blood. It was on my hands, dried into the lines of my palms, beneath my nails, even on my tie where I'd tried to wipe it off. The waiting room felt like another universe, too bright, too quiet, every sound too clean to belong to a night like this. My wife sat across from me, shaking, her clothes stiff with crimson. She kept whispering the same sentence under her breath, over and over. She was smiling, she was just smiling. I couldn't look at her, because I knew if I did, I'd break. The clock above the nurse's station ticked like a hammer. Every second it stole from me felt deliberate. When the surgeon finally emerged, his face told me before his mouth did. He didn't need words, his eyes were grave enough. "She's stable," he said softly, but the bullet fragmented. It pierced through her upper chest and damaged spinal tissue. We managed to stop the bleeding, but he didn't finish. He didn't have to. My knees gave out. I felt my wife's fingers dig into my arm, her sobs muffled into my sleeve. Stable meant alive, barely. It also meant broken. Again. My mind flashed back to the first hospital, 5 years ago, the night of the car crash, the same sterile lights, the same helplessness. Only this time, it wasn't a stranger who did it. It was our neighbor. I wandered the hallway outside the ICU like a ghost. Every beep from a monitor sounded like judgment. The nurse's shoes squeaked across the tile. Somewhere, a baby cried. The contrast was unbearable, one life beginning while another dangled by a thread. When they finally let me see Lily, she looked small against the white sheets, her skin pale but warm. Tubes tangled around her chest like vines. I brushed her hair from her face, whispering things I didn't believe, that it would be okay, that she'd be home soon, that justice would come. Her eyelids fluttered, and for a second I thought she was waking up. But it was just a reflex, a cruel flicker of hope. The detective came in quietly, notebook in hand. "We have the shooter in custody," he said. "She's claiming self-defense." I laughed, the sound hollow, foreign even to me. "Self-defense?" I whispered. "Against a 15-year-old in a wheelchair?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence said it all, the system was already bending, making room for her excuses. I felt something inside me snap then, clean and cold. I'd spent my career believing justice was blind. But that night, I saw it clearly, it wasn't blind. It was selective. And as I sat beside my daughter's hospital bed, holding her limp hand in mine, I made a silent promise to the God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. If the system dared to protect Karen, then I'd make sure it never protected her again. By morning, the headlines had already twisted the truth into something unrecognizable. Local woman discharges firearm during neighborhood dispute, teen injured in unfortunate accident. Unfortunate accident. Those words burned through me harder than the image of my daughter's blood. Karen had been released within hours, no charges, no cuffs, not even a mugshot. They let her walk out of the precinct like she was the victim. Pending further investigation, the report said, as if there was anything left to investigate when half the neighborhood saw her pull the trigger. I watched the footage myself in the detective's office, Karen shouting, aiming, firing. But when I demanded to know why she wasn't behind bars, the officer shifted uncomfortably, eyes low. "Sir, she has a permit, and she claimed self-defense. The DA wants to be cautious. You understand how delicate these HOA communities can be." Delicate. That word nearly made me laugh. My daughter was lying in a hospital bed, and they were worried about neighborhood harmony. By noon, the HOA released an official statement on their Facebook page: "We are deeply saddened by last night's tragic misunderstanding between two of our residents. The HOA stands with both families in this difficult time." I could barely finish reading it. Both families. As if there was any symmetry between a mother holding her dying child and a woman holding a smoking gun. My wife saw it before I could hide it, and her scream echoed through the hospital hallway. The comments below the post were worse, people defending Karen. "She's always been a good neighbor. Maybe the kid startled her. We shouldn't rush to judgment." The same neighbors who'd left pies on our doorstep were now protecting the woman who tried to kill our daughter. That evening, Karen appeared on the local news, her voice trembling perfectly for the camera. She wore soft pastels, her hair neat, her makeup understated, every detail designed to scream misunderstood suburban mother. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, eyes glassy but dry. "I thought I was in danger. I reacted on instinct. I'm devastated for that family. That family. Not us. Not the child she nearly buried. Just a vague, detached performance for sympathy. And it worked." Reporters called her the shaken homeowner. Online threads called her brave. The narrative shifted so fast it made me dizzy. I tried calling the district attorney myself, leveraging every ounce of influence my title carried, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "You're too close to this, sir," he said. "We can't let emotion guide the case." Emotion? Emotion was all that kept me from turning this entire city upside down. That night, as I sat in the dark outside Lily's room, I stared at the reflection in the glass, tired eyes, trembling hands, rage pulsing beneath my skin. I'd spent my life trusting the law, believing it protected the innocent. But now, watching the system bend to shield a woman like Karen, I realized something brutal: the law doesn't protect the good, it protects the powerful. And Karen was both in her little suburban world. The headlines could lie, the HOA could defend, and the police could hesitate, but I wouldn't. I didn't need permission to do what came next. I only needed purpose. And I had it. I stopped being a grieving father and became a quiet machine, methodical, cold, and impossibly focused. Sometime between midnight and the third cup of coffee, grief taught me how to sift pain into purpose. I started where law always starts: evidence. My office lights burned long into the night as I pulled every public feed I could find: doorbell cams, ring footage from neighboring houses, the traffic camera at the corner, even the HOA meeting recordings where Karen praised community standards with that same thin smile. I scrubbing timestamps, isolating frames where her mouth curved, where her hand went into a purse, where the silver barrel flashed. I learned her route across the lawn, the way she leaned on the porch rail, the exact words she used when she spoke about those people. I printed screenshots until the printer whirred like a small protest. I stapled them into stacks and taped them to the wall like a map of the night that had stolen my daughter. Then I started to dig deeper: public records, gun ownership databases, the obscure dealer names that only show up in little print filings. There was a shadow of a connection: a local dealer with a sketchy history, a relative who ran a small firearms business out of a garage 2 towns over. I put in quiet calls: a friendly neighbor asking about a missing shipment, an old colleague in licensing who owed me a favor. Every answer threaded me closer to the truth. I recorded everything, legally, meticulously. Phone logs, email headers, bank transfers. I pulled HOA minutes where Karen's name appeared more than once in relation to property enforcement and special privileges. I traced her donations to local officials and found blurred lines between civility and influence. Late one night a neighbor slipped me a thumb drive. "I don't want trouble," she said, eyes darting, full of raw doorbell footage that captured the argument from a different angle, the shove I hadn't seen on the public stream. I encrypted that drive, cataloged every second, and put it in a file labeled with the exact time and location. Chain of custody mattered even in vengeance. I sat up nights drafting motions in my head I couldn't file publicly, not yet, because the legal chessboard had to be set without tipping my hand. I wrote subpoenas in draft form, imagined the questions to peel open Karen's lies, planned the witness list that would produce a chorus rather than a single voice. I mapped the media timeline, when to leak what, how to let the story breathe in the right room so the DA couldn't shrug it off as community misunderstanding. I reached out, through an intermediary, to an investigative reporter I trusted, someone who understood how to hold the mirror to a neighborhood and make it crack. We discussed how to present proof without destroying innocent privacy, how to protect sources who feared retribution. There were nights I almost let rage shortcut the work, snap at a neighbor, confront Karen in public, burn everything down with a single press release, but the lawyer in me held steady. The difference between righteous fury and blind vengeance is patience, and patience had become my weapon. Piece by piece, hour by hour, the case formed, facts aligned, witnesses steadied, digital evidence locked under passwords. It was no longer just about punishing her, it was about making sure the world saw what I had seen in the blue light on my driveway. Justice would not be loud or impulsive. It would be inevitable. I waited 3 weeks before making my move, 3 weeks of pretending to grieve quietly while the entire neighborhood whispered about the poor woman who just made a mistake. Karen thought she'd won. She walked her dog every morning again, chin high, sunglasses large enough to hide the guilt she pretended not to feel. The HOA even threw her a support luncheon, where they toasted to healing and understanding. I watched it all from behind the tinted windows of my car, my fingers wrapped around the USB drive that held her undoing. Every piece of evidence I'd collected, the video angles, the unregistered gun purchase, the HOA email chain showing she'd been warned about her temper, was organized, time-stamped, and ready. But the final blow wasn't going to come from a courtroom. It was going to come from the court of public opinion. The first leak dropped on a Monday morning. A local journalist from the Tribune received an anonymous envelope with no return address, just a drive and a note that said, "You'll want to watch the 8:42 timestamp." Within 24 hours, the footage was everywhere. The camera angle from the neighbor's porch showed Karen storming across the lawn, yelling, pointing, firing. No editing, no commentary, just the truth, raw and undeniable. The comments section exploded. The same people who had defended her turned overnight. That's not self-defense. She aimed before the girl even moved. This woman should be in prison. By the end of the day, the HOA's website crashed under the weight of public outrage. Sponsors pulled their funding. Members resigned. But that was only the first wave. I'd made sure the next leak hit harder. A second file landed on social media, emails between Karen and the HOA treasurer, where she bragged about putting the Reynolds girl in her place and joked about noise violations coming with consequences. The screenshot spread like wildfire. The TV crews camped outside her house by evening, and her husband, red-faced and trembling, shoved microphones away while shouting, "No comment." Reporters used words like hate-fueled, targeted harassment, negligence. By day 3, Karen's employers at the real estate firm suspended her indefinitely. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that turned into a shouting match, half of them resigning on live-streamed video. I didn't say a word publicly. Every question directed my way was met with silence. No comment, I'd repeat, watching her empire crumble in slow motion. It wasn't about vengeance anymore, it was about equilibrium. The same social machine she'd used to humiliate and isolate others was now consuming her, one headline at a time. Her Facebook account vanished, her phone number was disconnected. Even her friends avoided her in public, afraid of being seen beside the neighborhood villain. By Friday, a new headline appeared: Attorney General's Office opens formal inquiry into HOA corruption. They didn't know it was me who'd triggered it. They didn't know the anonymous whistleblower who provided internal records was the same man who'd once sat across from Karen in her spotless living room, pretending to listen while she lectured him about Lawn Heights. The final leak, the one that ended everything, was an audio file. Karen's own voice, from a phone call the night before the shooting, laughing with a friend: "If that kid rolls out there again with her music, I swear I'll scare her quiet for good." When that aired on national television, her world collapsed completely. By the weekend, she was hiding inside her house, curtains drawn, HOA nameplate ripped from her lawn. And for the first time since the night of the shooting, I slept without waking to the echo of the gunshot. The truth had finally started speaking louder than her lies. The grand jury convened 3 weeks after the leaks detonated across every news outlet. I didn't attend the first day, but I could feel its pulse through the courthouse walls, a quiet, methodical reckoning humming beneath marble floors and fluorescent light. By then, public outrage had done what the system initially refused to: force the law to act. The DA who once warned me to stay detached, now stood on live television promising a comprehensive review of the evidence. He called it transparency, I called it survival instinct. Nobody wanted to be the prosecutor who let a white, suburban HOA president shoot a disabled teenager and walk free. So the machine finally turned, gears grinding, paperwork moving, subpoenas flying. I spent those days half in the hospital, half in the courthouse. Lily had regained consciousness, her voice weak but sharp as ever. "Did she get away with it?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. I told her no, not anymore. That seemed to give her strength. She smiled, then whispered, "Good. Then don't stop." Those words carried me into every meeting, every late-night review of affidavits, every hallway where the scent of burnt coffee mixed with stale justice. Inside the grand jury room, the footage spoke louder than any testimony could. They watched Karen stride across the lawn, shout, raise the gun, and fire. They saw the flash, the recoil, the aftermath. Then came the audio recording, her own voice promising to scare that kid quiet. When the last clip ended, the room was silent except for the scratch of a pen. The DA didn't have to dramatize, the evidence had already done that. By the time the witnesses were done, neighbors, police officers, even the HOA treasurer who broke down crying on the stand, the narrative of self-defense was dead. When the indictment was announced, the courthouse steps were lined with cameras. Second-degree attempted murder, aggravated assault, illegal possession of a firearm. Karen turned herself in that afternoon, her face pale, her once perfect hair pulled back in a trembling bun. Reporters shouted questions as she was escorted in, but she kept her eyes down. The same community that once applauded her now glared from sidewalks, holding signs that read "Justice for Lily." Watching it from my office window, I didn't feel triumph, only a grim, quiet gravity. Justice wasn't victory. It was restoration, a correction to the lie that had infected every law and neighborly smile on that street. That night, I visited Lily again. She was stronger, her hand warm in mine. "Did they finally believe you?" she asked. I nodded, and she exhaled like she'd been holding that breath for weeks. I wanted to tell her it was over, but deep down, I knew better. An indictment wasn't justice yet. It was the door opening. The trial, that would be the reckoning. And when it came, I intended to be standing in that courtroom, not as the Attorney General, but as the father who refused to let silence bury his child. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and cold air, the kind that clings to marble walls and microphones. Reporters lined the back rows, pens tapping nervously, cameras poised like vultures waiting for blood. Karen sat at the defense table in a beige blazer, her face powdered pale, her hands trembling just enough to look sympathetic. Her lawyer, a sharp-suited man with a voice like polished glass, whispered to her occasionally, as if he could rehearse innocence into her. Across from them, I sat beside the district attorney, watching the jurors file in one by one, their eyes cautious, guarded, human. This wasn't just a trial, it was the reckoning of every quiet injustice that had ever worn a polite smile. The prosecution began with the footage, the same clip that had already burned through the internet, now displayed on the courtroom's massive monitor. The room went silent except for the soft hum of the projector. The video flickered to life, Karen storming across the lawn, yelling, her hand diving into her purse, the silver flash, the sound that tore through the night. Lily's small figure slumped against her wheelchair, the scream echoing. Even after weeks of watching that clip, my breath still caught when the gun fired. One juror flinched. Another covered her mouth. When the screen went black, the silence that followed felt heavier than sound. Karen's lawyer rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his tone patient, persuasive, "what you've just seen is a tragedy, a moment of panic, not premeditation. My client feared for her safety. She saw movement in the dark and reacted. We can't punish fear, even when it leads to terrible outcomes." He paused, letting the words hang like smoke. The jury didn't blink. I could tell some of them wanted to believe him. It's easier to believe in accidents than in cruelty. But the DA was ready. He stood, voice steady as stone. "Fear doesn't explain the words," she said before she pulled the trigger. He gestured to the evidence table. "Let's listen again." The recording played, Karen's voice, clear, laughing on the phone a day before the shooting. "If that kid rolls out there again with her music, I swear I'll scare her quiet for good." The sound filled the room like poison gas. Karen's face drained of color. Her lawyer's pen slipped from his hand. Witnesses followed, neighbors who had once defended her. Mrs. Parker, who'd hidden behind her curtain that night, told the jury how Karen shouted, "Turn that off or I'll make you." Another neighbor, voice trembling, admitted he'd been too afraid to come forward before. Even the HOA treasurer took the stand, tears streaking his cheeks as he confessed to helping Karen delete internal messages after the shooting. "She told us to make it look like a mistake," he said, "but we all knew what happened." When it was my turn to testify, the courtroom seemed to exhale. The bailiff swore me in, the wood grain of the witness stand warm under my palm. I looked at Karen, really looked at her, for the first time since that night. Her eyes were hollow, all pretense gone. I spoke slowly, carefully, but not as an attorney. "That woman didn't just shoot my daughter," I said. "She shot everything we believe this community stood for: decency, fairness, safety." My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "She looked at a child in a wheelchair and saw inconvenience. She called my daughter's music noise. But it wasn't noise, it was her life, her courage, her joy." I pointed to the monitor, still frozen on the image of Lily slumped in her chair. This is what happens when entitlement becomes power. When people like her believe they can decide who belongs and who doesn't. Karen's lawyer objected, claiming emotional manipulation, but the judge overruled him. "He's a father," she said quietly. "Let him speak." I turned back to the jury. "I've spent my life defending the law," I continued, my voice cracking, "but that night, when I saw my little girl lying in the street, I realized justice isn't words on paper. It's choices. And tonight, it's yours." The closing arguments came and went like the last act of a tragedy everyone already knew the ending to. Karen's lawyer begged for mercy, painting her as a woman broken by guilt. The DA countered with calm precision, she didn't feel guilt until she got caught. When the jury retired to deliberate, the room exhaled collectively. My wife held my hand so tightly it hurt. Outside, rain tapped against the courthouse windows, a soft, rhythmic sound, like the heartbeat of something waiting to be reborn. 2 hours later, the jury returned. Karen wouldn't look up. The foreman stood, voice steady. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts." The words echoed through the courtroom, each one a hammer striking stone. My wife sobbed quietly into my shoulder. Karen collapsed forward, face in her hands, her lawyer frozen beside her. Reporters scrambled to the exits, already calling in headlines, but all I could hear was Lily's voice in my memory, whispering, "Don't stop." As the bailiffs led Karen away, she turned once, just once, and our eyes met. For the first time, there was no arrogance in her, no authority, no mask. Just fear, the kind she'd once claimed to feel but never truly understood until now. The judge's gavel came down, sharp and final, and the courtroom fell still. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. Justice isn't joy. It's release. And as I walked out into the storm, the rain washing the courthouse steps clean, I realized something simple but unshakable: the world may bend, but truth, once freed, doesn't break. The verdict echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap, guilty on all counts. For a long moment, no one moved. Even the air seemed to pause. Karen's body sagged against the defense table, her face buried in trembling hands as the bailiff stepped forward. The prosecutor exhaled quietly beside me, and my wife, sitting in the front row, began to cry, not the sharp kind of grief from the hospital, but something slower, deeper, a release that came with truth finally being heard. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My body felt hollow, my heart beat strangely calm. For months I'd built toward this moment, and yet, standing there, I realized that justice doesn't fill the emptiness left behind, it only stops the bleeding. The judge, an old colleague of mine, read the sentencing with clinical precision: 15 years for aggravated assault with intent to kill, 10 for unlawful discharge, and 5 for obstruction of justice. Karen's lawyer tried to argue for leniency, saying she'd suffered enough in public humiliation. The judge didn't flinch. Public humiliation, she said flatly, is not punishment, it's consequence. The gavel struck once, final and absolute. Outside the courthouse, the sky was a wash of gray, heavy with unshed rain. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones thrust forward, voices overlapping in a hungry storm of questions. "Mr. Reynolds, do you feel vindicated? What does justice look like to you now? Will you press civil charges?" I didn't answer any of them. The sound of shutters clicking, pens scratching, headlines being born, it all felt meaningless. Karen was led down the steps between two officers, wrists cuffed, hair disheveled, the same woman who once fined neighbors for leaving their bins out too long, now reduced to a ghost of her own arrogance. As she passed, our eyes met for the last time. There was no hatred left in me, only exhaustion. She mouthed something I couldn't hear, maybe sorry, maybe please. It didn't matter. Her apology, like her rules, had come too late. The fallout spread quickly through the neighborhood. By week's end, the HOA had voted to dissolve entirely. The treasurer resigned first, then the vice president, then the rest followed like dominoes. Their pristine bylaws and community standards were buried under legal audits and federal inquiries. Neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid me now brought casseroles and condolences, their guilt thinly disguised as kindness. The once flawless lawns looked overgrown, the streetlights flickered without maintenance. Maple Drive no longer looked like the brochure-perfect suburb we'd moved into. It looked real, imperfect, cracked, human. But peace didn't return overnight. Lily's recovery was slow, her movements limited, her nights filled with nightmares she tried to hide behind forced smiles. Every time she winced, I heard the gunshot again. Every time she laughed, I wondered if I'd done enough to deserve it. My wife tried to rebuild normalcy, decorating the porch again, coaxing Lily outside with books and sunlight. One evening, weeks after the sentencing, Lily played her music again. The same song, soft, defiant, unbroken. No one complained. No one dared. The sound floated down the empty street, not as noise but as proof that life still breathed here. I sat beside her, hands folded, watching the sky fade from gold to gray. "You think she'll ever forgive me?" I asked quietly. Lily looked at me, confusion softening her tired eyes. "For what?" she whispered. I smiled faintly. "For believing in laws before believing in people." She shook her head, resting her hand on mine. "You didn't fail, Dad. You fought." Her voice was thin but steady. And for the first time since the night of the shooting, I let myself breathe. Justice had come, yes, but it hadn't brought peace. It had simply leveled the scales, leaving behind silence where arrogance used to live. I looked down the street, at the empty space where Karen's house once stood, sold, stripped, forgotten, and felt a strange stillness settle inside me. Justice doesn't heal, it only ends the bleeding long enough for life to try again. And as Lily's music played into the fading light, I realized that maybe that was enough. The world slowed down after the trial, as if the noise that had swallowed our lives finally ran out of breath. Weeks passed, and the headlines faded, replaced by newer scandals and fresher tragedies, but for us, inside that small blue house at the end of Maple Drive, time moved differently. Lily's laughter was softer now, rarer, but when it came, it was real. Her strength surprised even the doctors. Every morning, she'd will herself to the porch, humming as she adjusted the small speakers beside her chair. The same song always played first, Brave. The one she'd listened to that night, the one that carried her through every dark hour afterward. This time, though, the sound wasn't a whisper fighting to survive, it filled the whole street, unashamed, untouchable. The ramp gleamed freshly painted under the sun. My wife planted lavender along its sides, Lily's favorite scent, so that every breeze carried calm instead of fear. Neighbors who once hid behind curtains now waved again. A few even stopped by with small gifts or shy apologies, their guilt wrapped in politeness. I accepted their kindness quietly. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer, not yet, but I could at least let peace settle where rage used to live. Across the street, Karen's old house stood empty, shutters closed, the "for sale" sign rusted and leaning. Grass grew high around it, wild and unkept, as if the earth itself was reclaiming what she'd tried to control. Lily started painting again. She said it helped her hands regain strength. One afternoon, I came home to find her working on a canvas, a bright, sweeping portrait of the porch bathed in sunlight, her wheelchair beside the open door. She'd titled it, "Still Here." When I asked her what it meant, she smiled faintly and said, "You don't have to move on, Dad. You just have to move forward." I didn't have an answer, just a tightness in my throat and pride too big for words. Some nights, when the house is quiet, I sit on that same porch and listen to the wind rustling through the maple trees. The neighborhood feels different now, not perfect, not pure, but honest. The fences are chipped, the lawns uneven, but the silence isn't tense anymore. It's peaceful. I used to think justice was about winning, about punishment and balance, but I've learned it's something quieter. Justice is Lily's laughter echoing down the street without fear. It's music playing freely where pain once ruled. It's the absence of her scream in my dreams. Sometimes, in the half-light before dawn, I whisper the words I never got to say that night, an apology to the universe for not protecting her sooner, a promise to never let silence turn into surrender again. And as the sun rises over Maple Drive, golden light spilling across the ramp, I finally understand what peace truly is. Justice isn't revenge, it's silence where pain used to be.